Networking your way into target employers. What exactly does that mean and why is it so important in today's job market? Simply put, this is the process of targeting specific employers and then networking your way into those organizations. It's a particularly effective, proactive strategy for connecting to job opportunities. It allows you to take a step beyond scouring the job boards and move into the position of finding the companies that you want to work for, companies that can use someone with your particular skills and experience. As we go through this material in this session recording, don't think about yourself as simply a job seeker. Think about yourself as a highly skilled consultant with experience and knowledge to fix the problems facing companies today, because that's exactly what you are. According to statistics, up to 80% of all jobs are filled before they're ever even advertised. So, why don't companies publish all of their job opportunities? There are a number of reasons that companies do not publicize job openings immediately or sometimes at all. For some, it may be that they're not yet prepared or able to spend the time on the hiring or training process. Other companies may not have the internal infrastructure to bring on new headcount, even though the business might need it. And for yet others still, not publishing their openings can be a strategic choice since they want to know if potential employees can find them. But regardless of why companies don't publicize openings now or even later in the hiring cycle, it's not always as important as your need to create a strategy to tap into these hidden jobs. The truth is that the closer you get to the time where the company publishes or advertises that opening, then the greater competition you will face from others. If you can make yourself known to the company at the point before they publish a job opening, you're going to be facing much less competition. So, today, as we go through this material, we're going to focus on how you can gain visibility with the employers that you're targeting. On the My Impact web portal, we have multiple webinars and recorded tutorials for building a target list of employers. If you haven't yet started building a target list, it's a smart strategy for all disciplines. In addition to the research tools and resources on My Impact, you want to consider tapping into resources such as the local news, and that might be local newspapers, business journals, even industry and trade publications. Think about looking at the top employer list or best places to work lists. But also consider resources such as LinkedIn. When you research your target companies, you may find similar companies that you would be interested in. Also, consider taking a look at where your contacts work. You may want to add some of their companies to your wish list. Once you've created your target list of companies that match your specific criteria, that is your wish list, you're ready to connect to decision makers at those organizations of interest. Maybe you've seen job leads at the company's website, but maybe not. Remember that just because a company doesn't have a published opening doesn't mean they have no need for you. They may just not know it yet. In today's session, you'll learn ways to research key decision makers on your target list. We'll talk about how to connect. What are the logistical options for connecting with a key decision maker? And then once you've decided how to connect, what do you say to actually engage them in the conversation? So let's assume that you've identified your target companies. Here's a good way to get started with your target list. You want to think through the contacts that you have and start with something as basic as listing them on a spreadsheet. List all of your target companies, the contacts that you either have or know of, and then stop and take a second look at that list. Ask yourself if the contacts that you have are people who are truly in a position to either give you information or help you move forward with your networking. For most of us, we're probably going to have to think about additional contacts. And when you're looking for contacts at a target company, you want to think in terms of layers. Think about HR and recruiting professionals, people who would be in your peer group, people who would be your direct supervisors, people who would be a one level up contact, whether that's at the manager, director, VP, or C level. And you may be thinking, well, how would I know what level of contact to target? Well, just simply think about what level of professional within that organization will actually understand the value that you could bring to the organization. And it may be something as simple as making a list of target job titles and then thinking about what's the most likely job title that I would report to at this organization. And I do want to just make a note about HR recruiting professionals. While these individuals are often tasked to fill positions, you do want to be mindful of only connecting with HR and recruiting professionals when you're working to network your way into an organization. Typically, if you're looking for something, let's say in marketing, the most effective way of reaching out will be to connect with the manager of marketing, the director of marketing. Approaching the person with the need directly is going to be a more effective method of landing a conversation and ultimately the job. As you begin to develop a profile of each individual contact on your prospect list, just make note of how you think the person is likely to want to be contacted. Do they have a heavy social media presence? If so, maybe an electronic means of contact would be best. Does it look like they're heavily networked in the local community? Well, in that case, maybe a phone call is going to be more appropriate. But other times, you may find that there's limited information, either about them online or through the community. If so, perhaps a more formal mailed outreach letter is going to be the best option. But in many cases, sending some type of message via LinkedIn is going to be your best bet. And if you're not yet familiar with all the options for communicating on LinkedIn, I strongly recommend that you listen to the live or recorded version of our LinkedIn 2 Networking and Communication webinar. In this webinar, we walk you through the options for conversing with people through LinkedIn. But whether you use LinkedIn or even sending a traditional email, don't assume that the only way you can connect is through electronic media. Let's face it, turning away from a conversation online is as easy as hitting the delete button. So, including phone calls in your overall targeting strategy is a smart approach. Hand in hand with making phone calls is doing networking in person. In person networking is a great way to build rapport, relationships, and make lasting connections that can pay off for years. Seek out opportunities to network offline through professional associations, job search support groups, and even community or volunteer events. Whether you decide to send a message electronically or through the postal service, remember that all written outreach efforts should include just a couple of key things. You want to make sure that you're including your introduction and don't assume that someone's going to double back to read your LinkedIn profile or your resume first. Make it easy on them. You also want to include a very clear reason for your outreach. And the mutual benefit disclosure. We believe here at Impact Group that networking should be a two-way street. So, what is this individual going to get out of the interaction? By reaching out, your goal should be to forge a long term relationship with the idea that you're going to give just as much as you get over the course of time. So, that might mean sharing things like a customer lead, a piece of industry news, maybe even banking on a mutual friend relationship. And then you also want to leave them with a call to action. Now, it may seem a little counterintuitive, but there are some things that we recommend that you try and avoid. And these are the direct questions related to job search, including things like, are you hiring? Can you introduce me to the hiring manager? Can you forward my resume? Can you share my resume? And by avoiding these obvious questions, you allow a more natural relationship to develop where you're putting yourself back in that position of helping a company identify that they have a problem and you are the solution to that problem, sometimes before they ever even post the job. A pain letter is another option for making outreach to who you believe to be the hiring manager or decision maker at one of your targeted companies. Using the pain letter, you should be prepared to talk about the pain, the problems, challenges, issues facing the company that you're targeting. And let's face it, all companies have issues, especially as they're growing. The pain letter is the primary outreach to the decision maker, and it helps set you up as the solution to the pain that the company is feeling. And your research and your information gathering should really point to what that pain might be. So here's a sample of a pain letter, and you'll see that it includes a hook at the beginning, a very soft and subtle approach to the pain, but then a very clear parallel to how this person has solved the pain in the past, and then a closing and a call to action. All of the sample correspondence is available to you in the presentation notes from this recorded webinar, and we encourage you to borrow ideas from these to create your own correspondence. The message on the previous slide is ideal when you think you have a pretty good idea what the pain is, but also you know who the hiring manager will be. But what about those times where maybe you don't have a good sense for what the challenges are facing the company, or maybe you don't know who the hiring manager is? Maybe you have that friend of a friend connection, not necessarily a direct link to the hiring manager, but a contact that's warm that you can build upon. So, in that case, you do want to build upon that relationship and reach out to that person. And you'll notice in this example, both Fred and Sue are connected to Sandra M. But in this case, it's a little bit of a softer approach, giving a reason for the outreach, talking a little bit about their background, also asking for some time, a very specific call to action, and offering any help that they might be able to offer in the future. While finding an individual in common is the easiest way to drive commonality between you and a potential contact, there are other avenues that you can explore, such as having education or schools in common, having the same past employers, maybe even membership in the same industry association, groups, etc. Regardless of what links you to your desired target, remember to speak to it in your outreach. So let's turn our attention next to making phone calls. And let's be honest, if you're having a phone conversation or an in person conversation, using the exact same kind of wording that you would use in written correspondence, well, you're likely to come across as maybe a little stiff, maybe even a little false. So you need to approach a phone call with a plan for a live conversation, a voicemail, but also how you're going to address the receptionist or gatekeeper. And let me start there first. While most organizations have gone to an automated attendant, there are still organizations that either because of size or culture, they make the decision to maintain a live reception desk. If that's the case, and you're asked questions about the nature of your call or why you're calling, just simply say you're calling to follow up on a networking contact, ask to be put through to your contact. If they won't put you through to that person live, then ask to go through to their voicemail. Sometimes in some companies, you still can't get through to that person's voicemail. If that's the case, call back before 8 a.m., call back after 5 p.m., and more often than not, you're going to find that that company has rolled over to an automated attendant. As you prepare your script for a call, and we do recommend that you script it out, you want to think about including just a couple of key points. Include a brief version of your presentation statement, elevator pitch, or intro statement, and this shouldn't be several minutes long. We're talking 10 to 20 seconds at most. Then also think through the segue for the reason for your call and how you're connected if appropriate. It may sound something as simple as, you don't know me, but thanks to LinkedIn, I know of you. The reason for my call is I'm in job search and I'm trying to do some research into your company. I was wondering if you had 5 minutes to talk with me about some things that I just couldn't find on the internet. Then, if they're open to it, go ahead and go into your questions. And these should be prepared questions and truly reflect things that you can't find easily on the web. But also, think about having one of your prepared questions something as simple as, if you were in my shoes, who would you be talking to? You never know what information you might get by asking a question like that. But also remember the mutual benefit disclosure. We talked about this earlier in regard to written correspondence, but the same is true for phone conversations. So be prepared to make an offer or at least offer to be of assistance. Then close them by thanking them for their time, reconfirm any agreements or promises made, and end the call. And as you conduct the call, be mindful of how much time you're spending. If you originally told them 5 minutes, then stick to that. It's okay to say, I want to be respectful of your time and I can see my 5 minutes is up. Do you have a couple more minutes to talk, or would it be better if I called you back later? Then, as you're thinking through your script, you want to think about how you're going to close the call and how you're going to show your gratitude. Being overly nervous can lead to forgetting to offer the simple gratitude that you feel, but it can also cause you to be a little overly wordy in your thanks. So, as you spend time with your script and questions, think about that process, how you're going to close and show your thanks. And then once the call is complete, don't forget to follow up with an email or LinkedIn invitation, briefly summarizing any agreements made and offering again to be of assistance in the future. As you prepare to execute on your networking calls, you also want to be prepared for voicemails. Make sure that you're including at least a couple of key points in each voicemail, including that brief intro and the reason for your outreach. It may sound something like, I'm doing a little research into your company and I was wondering if you could answer a few questions for me. I can be reached at dot dot dot. If it's not convenient to call me back, I can try you again later this week. Have a great day. And you'll see there we also included the call to action, contact information, and the close. Now, obviously, your voicemail script doesn't have to sound exactly like this. Each script should be unique, but the key is to make it personal, appropriate to the party that you're calling, and warm. You don't want to sound like you're reading from a script, even if you are. So do remember to smile. Now, we're often asked for metrics on this. I need to know specific information about how many times I will have to call into an organization for this to work. And the reality is there's no specific rule or magic formula about how many times you'll need to call into a company before you reach a networking contact who will move things forward for you. So as a result, I just encourage you to keep your expectations a bit loose as you begin. Now, while we don't think there's a magic formula for success, there probably is a reasonable point where you want to think about retiring certain contacts. And if you've reached out to an individual 4 or more times within an 8-week time frame with zero response, then I think it's time to either significantly vary your approach or retire that contact for now. But in addition, you want to remember that the target list is truly a living document. So as you begin to have conversations, and you will have conversations, just remember to watch for subtle clues thrown out by the contacts. Maybe a company that you were very excited about in the beginning is really not the right place for you. So be willing to move a company off your target list if your research and conversations point towards making that change. The reality is that change comes from a lot of different directions, and putting yourself in the position of solving the problems facing the companies that you're targeting is an incredibly smart strategy. Thank you for listening to this recording, and we wish you the best as you move forward. Take care.